Since we have 1 hour, I just want to get started with what I would think is a very simple question, and then we can get on with the other things. I would like to ask you, what is the most important findings so far that have been done in epigenetics?
Well, we have to understand what the word epigenetics means. So let's back up and go, before epigenetics, what did we understand in regard to science? And the answer was something called genetics. And if I say what I was teaching medical students, we would say genetic control, which means control by genes. This is the belief that most medical students and doctors have been trained with, and the public have received this kind of education through their basic schooling about how genes control our characters and our traits and our behavior. And when you believe that story, that genes control your life, then you have to stop for a second. And you have to say, wait, as far as I know, I didn't pick the genes I came with, and if I don't like my traits, I can't change the genes. And then what that leaves people to believe is that we are victims of our heredity. So, like, if there's cancer running in the family, or Alzheimer's, or diabetes, everyone says, oh my goodness, this is genetic and it's running in my family, and I'll be a victim of this, and I can't do anything about it because I can't control the genes. So we believe in victim, and that's really bad, because that means you give up power over your life. You say, no, the genes have power over my life. And then we find ourselves that we believe we're weak and we're frail or we're vulnerable. And I go, okay, that's the old science. I say, what's the new science? It's called epigenetics. And I say, well, what is epigenetics? I say, well, epi, the little EPI in the front, it means above. So if I say epigenetic control, it really means control above the genes. And now we know that the way we see life, the way we respond to the environment, our perceptions of the world, these are what control our genes. And I say, well, why is that important? Because if genes control your life, you're a victim. But if your perceptions or your beliefs control your life, then you realize you can be master, because you can change your perception, you can change your environment, you can change your belief. So the new science and the old science are profoundly different. The old science, victim; the new science, we are masters of our genetics and our fate. We don't have to be believing that cancer is going to take us, or some disease is going to take us because it's in our family. We now recognize that if we change our attitudes, our emotions, and our beliefs, that we can control our genes and can control our life. And that's the biggest difference between a victim and a master.
Now, Bruce, I have a question coming to my mind after listening to you. And what came to me was, like, if we have the power over the genes, what happened when I was born, and I didn't choose then the face I was going to have or how I was going to become physically, and so many ways I look like my dad or my mom, but that's genetics, and we don't have total power over that.
It's very interesting, Gloria, because I have to tell the very simple truth. When I was teaching in a medical school, in my growing up, in my developmental period, and college and graduate school, I was not a spiritual person. I didn't actually believe in spirituality. I believed in the science of genes and chemistry. So that's why I ended up being a scientist. And then when I learned how the cells work, the study of the cells revealed to me that we're actually spiritual entities that play through a body. A body is almost like a television set with antennas, and the antennas pick up like an identity, like a broadcast. So the relevance, it really blew my mind, was to own the fact that our identity is like a television broadcast, but our body is like a television set. Now, they're all different kinds of television sets, but they can play the same station. So the television set is not the personal identity, not the spirit. So the question is, then, who are we? Well, we're spirits playing through a physical body. And when I realized this, it so blew my mind, because I thought in the chemistry world, oh, we're born and we have these genes and we have this chemistry and then we have a life, and then when you die, the chemistry goes back into the earth, and that's that. Now I realize the bodies come and go, but the spirit is always present. And so, in fact, before I said we didn't pick the genes, I actually think we did. I think that we picked a life to come into, like a video game, and we jump into this life, and we use the life to learn about who we are. And this is very critical, because we're leaving behind the victim story, that we are not victims, that we are spiritual entities that have a very powerful control over our lives. But the issue is, we don't believe it. And it's very interesting, Gloria, because I wasn't raised in the conventional Christian religion, and yet when I go back today with my knowledge, and I hear the words that Jesus talked about, and he said, look, you can renew your life with your belief. He said that that you could do all the miracles that he did, but you don't believe it. And it turns out the new science says he was exactly right, that this is absolutely true. But if we believe we are victims, we become a victim. If we believe we are masters, we can become a master. And yet, all of us have been programmed to be victims and weak and feel we have no power. And this is a time in the world where that belief is going to disappear, and the new understanding of how truly powerful and spiritual we are is going to return to the civilization, and it's going to change the world like a revolution. The whole thing is going to change.
Yes, definitely. And I'm looking forward to it, as many people are, I imagine. And, one thing that I've been always wondering is that, we are made of cells and, systems and tissues, but the cells are made out of atoms, and the atoms are made of subatoms, and so forth. And they are 99% empty, 99.999%. At least that's what scientists are saying, according to quantum physics.
100% empty.
Okay, so this is the question. If it's 100% empty, if the cells are 100% empty, and atoms and whatever is made of, the building blocks that are made of, how does matter come into existence? If we are pure energy and we are empty, how can we become solid beings? What's the process that goes from point A, which is energy, to point B or point Z, which is matter?
Okay, very good question, because after coming from a world of teaching about chemistry and molecules and matter and DNA and genes, when I started to get into quantum physics, what we found out was the answer was this: what is quantum physics versus the conventional physics, or it's also called Newtonian physics? Newtonian physics is the physics that looks at the world and says it's made out of physical things like matter. And they said the atom in Newtonian physics, at first they said the atom was the smallest thing in the universe. But when the physicists started to be able to look inside the atom, at first they found things that looked like little particles, like protons and electrons and neutrons. And so they just said, oh, the atom is made out of smaller physical particles. But then quantum physics, and this is what changes everything, quantum physics says, so what's an electron made out of? Or what is that proton particle made out of? And when they looked inside, there was nothing physical. It was energy. It was like a miniature tornado. And you say, well, but that's not physical. I go, listen, let's say you're driving your car down the road, and a big tornado is coming right down the road at you. And I'm going to ask you a question, Gloria. What do you think would happen if you say, look, I'm just going to drive my car right through the tornado. I'm not going to stop. I'll just drive right through the tornado. And I'm going to ask you, do you think you could drive through a tornado with a car?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either, because a tornado is so powerful it can lift up the trucks and buildings and all that kind of stuff like that. And you say, yeah, but it's physical. You can't drive a car through it. If you drove your car into a tornado, it would be like driving your car into a stone wall. The car won't go through the tornado. And I say, yeah, but what's a tornado made out of? He said, well, I can see it. It's physical. I go, no. What you see is the dirt and the dust and anything that got picked up by the wind. But I said, the tornado itself is just the wind. There's nothing physical. And yet, it's an energy that has got so much force in it that if you try to push through a tornado, you can't. In your mind, it would appear to be very physical, and yet it's made out of energy. There's nothing physical about it. And then I say, well, here's an interesting fact. The atoms have miniature tornadoes. That's what they're made out of. And the tornadoes inside the atoms are even more powerful than the tornadoes that we see on the television or going across the land. And why is that relevant? Because I said, well, the atom, like a tornado, it's not physical, it's a force. And I say, yeah, but it's so powerful that you can't push your hand through the atom in the same way you can't drive the car through the tornado. The atom and the tornado are both not physical, but they have the character, or they look or feel like they're physical, but they're only made out of energy.
Mm-hmm. Now, what I think when you were saying this is like the ancients, the Hindus, they knew about the tornadoes in our bodies through the chakras. And what I feel is like the manifestation on different levels, like we are multidimensional beings. And that's one thing I want to ask you, if you believe that humans are multidimensional beings, because there are levels of manifestation, and the physical world is the densest of manifestations possible. And that's where we are living our experiences, but we also are beings that come from energy and spiritual beings. So there is some component into our existence as humans. I don't know about the animals, but I know as human that we have these possibilities of being from living in one body but being from different dimensions. Is that possible?
Absolutely. It's basically it's sort of like, as I said, number one, if you see the television set in your room, you say, that's the physical television set. And I say, yeah. Then you turn it on, you see the show. And I say, is the show coming from the television, or is it coming from the air that is invisible and then being picked up by the television set? And the answer is, no, the show is not inside the television. It's coming through the air. And I say, well, show it to me. He said, I can't see it. It's a television broadcast. It's a wave. You can't see it. It's energy. And I go, this is exactly the same as you look at the physical body and you say, that's like the television set, it's physical. And I go, but your identity is not from the inside the body, it's actually being received like a television set. This is true. On the surface of your cells, of all of your cells, your body is made out of like 50 trillion cells. When you look in the mirror, Gloria, and you look at yourself and you say, oh, there's one human being, Gloria, looking back. And I go, well, you call yourself a human being, but in truth, you are a community of 50 trillion cells. So you are made out, the cells are the living things. And I say, well, how do you play through the body? And I go, on the surface of the cells, of your 50 trillion cells, there are little molecules called proteins, but they look like little television antennas. And no two people have the same set of antennas and on their cells. And I say, yeah, but these are very important, because if I try to take my cells and put it into your body, Gloria, your immune system will say, these don't belong to me, they're not self. And your immune system will get rid of those cells, saying not self. And I go, yeah, but when the body says not self, how does it know it's not self? And the answer is because on the foreign cells, they have different antennas. They're listening to a different station. And as a result, you try to put them into your body, they're not listening to you, the cells. They're still listening to whoever they came from. And so this is very interesting, because in the last number of years, of course, they've done a lot of surgeries where they replace hearts and different, from a person who's died, they put a heart into a person who's still alive. And here's what they found out. When they transplant the heart, the receiver of that heart begins to pick up the broadcast of the person who donated the heart. Now, they're dead, but remember I said the body is dead, not the broadcast. The broadcast is always there. So if there's a heart with antennas that are tuned to that broadcast, they'll always pick up the broadcast. So when a person receives a heart from another person, they don't just receive the physical heart, but the heart is also receiving the broadcast. So why is this important? Because when the person receives a heart from somebody else, they begin to have some of the behavior or characteristics of the person who donated the heart, who is now dead. Well, the point is, well, where are they getting this from? The answer is because the heart is still alive and it still has the antennas, and it's still pulling in the identity like a broadcast of the original person. And here's one of the stories that I tell from the book about these transplants, that if you think about it, it will blow your mind. And that is, a young girl who needed a heart received a heart, a transplant from another young girl who died. And when they put the heart into the girl and transplanted the heart, after the operation, the girl who received the heart had nightmares every night. She was being killed. Every night she'd go to sleep, and then in her sleep she'd see the same nightmare, being killed again and again every night. Well, the doctors said, well, let's out of curiosity, who did this heart come from? So they went back and they found it came from another young girl, but they also found the young girl was murdered. Now here comes the interesting part. The police, when they asked the girl about the dream she had every night about being murdered, and it was so clear and so vivid, when she told the police about the dream, the police were able to catch the murderer through the girl's dream.
Oh, that's amazing.
What's the point? The point was, the other girl died, her body is gone, but I said, it's like a television set, so I'll give you the meaning of it. I go, let's say you and I are watching a TV show, Gloria, on the TV, and the TV breaks, and it doesn't work, and you say, oh, the TV's dead. And I go, yeah, is the broadcast dying, or is the broadcast still there? The TV's dead, but what about the broadcast? And you say, well, if I get another TV, and I plug it in and turn it on, and then I tune it to the station, the show is back on again. Meaning, the broadcast is not the TV set. The TV can come and go, but the broadcast is always there. So basically it says, we are like an energy broadcast being picked up by the 50 trillion cells in your body. And so my cells, my body is playing what I call the Bruce show. Your cells, Gloria, are playing the Gloria show. Here's the point. Let's say we get old at some point and then we die, and I say, okay, the television body, that's dead. But what about Gloria? What about Bruce? I go, oh no, that's the broadcast. And here's the point. If another body in the future is created from an embryo, and it has the same antennas that are on your cells right now, you're back, but in a different body. And yet, so the idea is you can never die, because you are not the physical body, you are the broadcast, and the broadcast is forever.
Now, in regards to how much we can actually modify our genes to say, I don't want to get a cancer, or I have this fear because in my family there has been this and that, and I have the power to control the genes, the cells.
Yes.
My question is, in the case of the little girl who had the transplant and inherited in one way or another the vibration that was carried on the heart, and how is this person going to be able to overcome all the information that is not in her conscious awareness? Because she's going to be manipulated or driven, more than manipulated. She's going to be driven by the energy and the vibration of the heart that she has been put in her body. So she's going to have this drive to do certain things that maybe she didn't do before. So now, how is she going to become aware of what she needs to overcome, or how she's going to be able to change or modify something if it's completely unconscious?
It doesn't become unconscious because, as I said, when people receive these hearts, they also see that, like they do things they never did before, or they eat things they never would even like before, and then they find out that the people who donated the heart, who had died, they like to eat that, or they did these things. So the recipient of the heart actually realizes that their life is different than before they got the heart, and basically it's just a matter of learning, and then you accommodate both entities, their original spirit, plus they are carrying the spirit of this other person. So and it's just learning. It's like learning a new behavior, and you go, oh, I didn't, I used to be a vegetarian, and now I'm eating chicken because the person who donated the heart, they love chicken, and I have a desire to eat chicken. That's what one of the stories about, like a person who was a total vegetarian, and then they started finding that they needed to have the chicken, and they changed their life because the spirit picked up by the heart that is in their body brought in new behavior, and then they just accommodate that new behavior in their life.
So where do behaviors come from if they can be so easily, tuned into a different vibration? How do they come to be, and how can we learn to modify the behaviors?
Well, okay, first of all, the antennas, there's a very large, it's like a combination lock, where you have to have like so many numbers in a row to make the lock open. The receptors, the antennas that are on the cells for each individual, there's a very large number of them, 50, 100 or more different antennas. So basically it says if you receive the heart from somebody else, it doesn't have your antennas on it, it has the other person's antennas. You can't change the antennas so that the other person's spirit will also be playing through it. You can learn to change the behavior, though, because this is we are free to, this is why I said we're not victims just because I got the antennas, because our conscious mind can change the behavior so we can record new behavior and record new lives. A lot of people in their lives, especially if they find they have a disease like cancer, and all of a sudden they wake up and go, oh my gosh, I haven't been living my life in a healthy way, or let the stresses get and bother me, and they wake up and they say, no, I'm going to change my behavior, and when they change their behavior, the cancer goes away. So basically it says that the behavior can be changed, and so you can regulate the body by changing your behavior, and the behavior is not built into the genes. The behavior is something that partly comes from your spirit and partly from your learning experiences before you're born. Actually, you start learning even while you're in the womb of your mother. You are already learning. So when you're born, you already have knowledge to a certain degree. So you can change your knowledge, you can change your belief, and that's the freedom of being a human, is that we're not stuck with a program, because the conscious mind can rewrite any behavior, any belief, change the way we see the world. And why is this important? Because you brought up cancer before, and I just want people to recognize this. Only less than 10% of cancer patients, the cancer is due to the genetics, the heredity in the family. 90% of cancer patients were born with healthy genes. It was just their lifestyle, their belief system, the way they were living, that changed the gene readout. But that's part of the new science called epigenetics, which is, genetics is the gene is the program and that's it. Epigenetics says, no, you can change the program by the way you behave and what you believe. This is why I said it becomes empowering for us, because we know, wait, I'm mainly a victim of my beliefs, but if I can change my beliefs, I don't have to be a victim anymore.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned the conscious mind. I wonder what's the nature of the mind, and what is the relationship between the mind and the beliefs?
Yes, very critical. The mind, and there's two parts to the mind, okay? because we talk about the conscious mind, the thinking mind, and we talk about what is called the subconscious mind, which is more like the habits. When you learn how to do something, the subconscious mind is like a recording device, and it records. So you learned how to walk when you were an infant. Once you learned how to walk, you never have to think about how to walk again. It's recorded in the subconscious. So the subconscious is more like habits that we learn, and the conscious mind is more creative. But we now know the conscious mind is connected to your spirit. So when you're being conscious, that means your spirit is involved with running the life that you want. When you're not paying attention, or when you're what we say not conscious, then your life is run by the programs, the habits in the subconscious mind. So it says that we have two minds, and one of them is ours, the conscious mind, because that's connected to your spirit, and the other one is more like a tape recorder that records your experiences, even from the time you were in the womb, through your life. When you repeat something over again, or when a pattern plays over again, the subconscious mind is like a tape recorder and will remember the pattern, so you don't have to learn it over and over and over again. So let's say, for example, when you first got a permit to drive a car, you didn't know how to drive a car. You had to be very conscious, and you had to look at the windows and look at the mirrors and pay attention to the dashboard and make sure your feet were doing the pedals right, and you were very focused with your conscious mind how to drive the car. And now I say, look, you've been driving a car now for years. So I say, today you get in the car, you put the key in the ignition, and let's say you have a passenger in the car, and I can say, you start the car, you start driving. You don't pay attention to the driving. You can have a conversation with the passenger, and you can have such a good conversation that at some point you look out the window and you realize you haven't paid attention to the road. And I go, you don't have to worry. The subconscious is driving the car. The subconscious is 1,000,000 times more powerful a computer than the conscious mind. So the subconscious mind is capable of doing it. But the difference is this. Subconscious mind is habit. Once you learn it, if you push the button, it's going to play the same thing over and over and over again. So the habits control our lives. And the idea is, but the conscious mind, here's the difference. This is very important for people to understand. The conscious mind is the part of your mind that your spirit is connected to. The conscious mind is the mind that is creative. It's the thinking mind. The conscious mind is the mind that has your wishes and your desires and what you want from your life. So if I say, Gloria, tell me what you want from your life. What do you want? And you say, well, I'm looking for this or this. And I go, that answer came from your conscious mind, your creative mind, the one connected to your spirit. That's what you want. And then I say, well, what about the programs in the subconscious mind? I say, oh, well, those are habits. Many of them are yours, but the fundamental ones, the most important ones in your life, you actually learned them when you were an infant in your family by observing your parents and your siblings and your community and your culture. As a child before 7, the conscious mind's not even working. The subconscious mind is like recording everything. The subconscious mind of an infant is watching the parents. And if it's a girl, it focuses on watching the mother and learning her behavior and learning how she responds and looking for the same kind of man that the father is. So the girl is programmed by the mother generally, and the boy is generally programmed by the behavior of the father. And the first 7 years, the conscious mind, the creative mind, the one with your wishes and desires, actually isn't working until you're about 7 years old. So the first 6 years of your life, 7 years, you're learning life not from your creativity, but you're learning life by studying your family and your community. So the behaviors, the most important behaviors that are in your subconscious mind, are actually not even your behaviors. Well, you learned them by studying your mother or your father or your family. So when your subconscious mind is operating, the most important programs it uses are not even yours. They're using the beliefs that you learned from your parents. Now, the Jesuits, they knew about this mind programming business. And they used to say, they would boast, they would say, give me a child and I will show you the man. Or sometimes they say even more specific, give me a child until it's 6 or 7 and it will belong to the church for the rest of its life. What they knew for 500 years is whatever the programs that you got for the first 6 or 7 years of your life, and they go into your subconscious, you're going to become those programs. And you say, yeah, but what about my conscious mind, the creative one, and the one in my spirit? Why doesn't that control my life? And here's the answer. The conscious mind, the one connected to your spirit, the one connected to what you want, your wishes, your desires, what you want, that conscious mind, the creative mind, is not time-bound. Meaning, Gloria, if I ask you, what are you doing next Wednesday? If you can tell me what you're going to do and Wednesday's not even here, then your mind is traveling into the future. If I say, Gloria, what did you do last Wednesday? And your mind will then not be here at the present moment. Your mind will go back and try to remember what you did in the past. And what's the point? When you're thinking with your conscious mind, by definition, when you're busy thinking, it's not paying attention. And when it's not paying attention, the mind shifts automatically into the subconscious. And I go, yeah, but where's the problem? I go, the problem is that the subconscious programs, the basic ones, they're not yours. You learned them from other people. You learn them from your family, your church, your community, whatever. And so when your mind is not paying attention, you automatically play the programs that you got from other people. So that means when you're not paying attention, you're actually playing somebody else's behavior. And it doesn't have to be supporting you. Well, the church knew that. And it said, if you give me the first 6, 7 years and I could program your subconscious mind, when you get older, they already knew that your conscious mind is going to be traveling and that you're going to still play the programs in the subconscious. So they knew, give me the child for the first 6 or 7 years. Once I put the programs in there, I don't care what your personal wishes are, because you're still going to end up playing these programs, because your conscious mind is not going to be paying attention all the time. It's going to be thinking. And when it's thinking, then the mind automatically goes into the default, which is when your conscious mind's not paying attention, you automatically play the subconscious programs. And I go, yeah, but when it's playing subconscious programs, are they your programs? And I go, oh, that's the problem. The basic subconscious programs you got from your family. You're playing your mother's behavior, your father's behavior, your family's behavior. You're not playing what you want. When I give a lecture, Gloria, I ask people, I say, I know that sometime in your history you had a very close friend, and you knew your friend's behavior very, very well. And you happen to know your friend's parent. And someday you saw that your friend has some of the same behavior as their father or their mother. And so you volunteer, you go like, hey, you know, Bill, you're just like your father. And then you back away from Bill, because Bill is going to go ballistic. Bill's going to say, how can you compare me to my father? And everyone laughs because they're very familiar with that, you know, they tell a friend, you're just like your mother, your father, and then their friend gets all upset, like, no, I'm not. And then I said, but here's what's important about the story. Everybody else can see, let's say, that Bill behaves like his father. The only one who doesn't see that is Bill. That's why when you say, Bill, you're just like your dad, Bill's the first guy who says, no, I'm not. And I go, but this is a very important lesson. Because what it says is, when you're not paying attention, you play the automatic programs in the subconscious. And those you got from your parents and your family. But your conscious mind was not paying attention. That's why you were playing the subconscious program. So when you play those behaviors from your mother, your father, your family, you don't even see it yourself, because your conscious mind is thinking or planning or creating or doing something. And so what it really means is, as the Jesuits have said, that, well, we have a conscious creative mind. It only works, and this is new from science, our conscious mind is only controlling our life about 5% of the time. 95% of our behavior is coming from the programs that we learned when we were infants and young kids, from the programs that we learned from other people. Only 5% of the time are we actually controlling our life with our conscious wishes and our conscious desires and what we want. So 95% of our life, we play behavior that we don't even see, and it's not even ours. So that's why sometimes you say, well, I've been trying to become successful and I can't get there. And you think, well, oh, maybe, I'm not worthy of success or something like that. It's like, no. It's because 95% of the time, you're playing the behavior you got from your parents, which most of it was negative behavior and beliefs about who we are. And so 95% of the time, we are sabotaging.
Now, Bruce, you mentioned a couple times that the conscious mind is connected to the spirit, and the conscious mind is at only 5% of the total of our consciousness.
Yeah.
My question is, why would the conscious mind be connected to the spirit when it's only 5%? It's like the tip of the iceberg, and spirit is the essence. It's the all-encompassing energy. I personally believe that the spirit is partly connected to the conscious mind and greatly connected to the unconscious mind, because otherwise we wouldn't have all the information that we can acquire through dreams or through the language of the subconscious, which is pretty symbolic, and that's the language of the spirit as well. It's not a rational language that the spirit uses to communicate with us. And so I ask you about this, about why do you believe that the conscious mind is the one connected to spirit, not the subconscious mind? And also regarding intuition, because you mentioned that is the thinking mind, and I do believe that the spirit has not much to do with the thinking mind, but with the abstract mind, which is something that goes beyond the ego. And the thinking mind is the ruler of the ego, are very connected. So intuition is completely related to the spirit, and intuition doesn't come from the thinking mind. It just pops up somehow, and we don't even know where it comes from.
Okay, so let's go back again. Okay, now here's how it works. Okay, number one, the conscious mind, when we look at it in using like what's called electroencephalograph, when they put wires on a person's head and they read the brain activity, EEG, okay? There's a vibrational frequency that at a higher vibration, that's when consciousness kicks into the brain. When they look at a child's brain, the child is not operating at that level of consciousness until after 6, okay? So basically, the first 6 years, the brain is not even operating at the level of consciousness. Now, I'm gonna come back to you because it's very important what you just said, and very correct that you are absolutely right. The spirit has the intuition. The spirit is the all-knowing. The spirit has been in one life and another life and another life, even with a memory of all that. Okay, but when you come into this life, the spirit gets into the body. The body has already learned about life before the spirit jumped in. The body has already got 6, 7 years of learning from recording all the behavior of the parents. I'll give you a reason why. Let's say I buy you a brand new iPod, and you take it out of the box, and I say the play button is like consciousness because you can select what you want to play, that you can create a playlist, you can do what you want. So I say, okay, you get a brand new iPod, you take it out of the box, and I say push the play button. And you say, but when I push it, nothing happens. I go, yeah, it can't play until you do what? You first have to download some programs. Then once you got the programs in, then you can select from the programs and be creative and make a playlist and all that. So the mind of a child is like the iPod. The conscious button doesn't work until about 6 or 7 years of age. The first 6 years is to put the data about the social structure, your culture, the planet, everything that you're living in. Those are programs that go in. When the spirit shows up to be in control, which is when conscious mind takes over, it brings in its awareness and its desires and wishes. That's why I said the conscious mind has what you want, your wishes and desires, but you have to operate with the programs that you learned. So the conscious mind is a mixture of spirit plus information from the subconscious mind. They work together. Now, here's the very important point. Why is it only 5% of the time does the conscious mind control? And the answer is this: because in the world we live in, it's so busy that our conscious mind has to keep thinking. As I said, Gloria, like the average person is like, well, they might be driving the car, but they're not paying attention to driving the car. They're thinking about, oh, what am I making for dinner? What's going on Thursday night? What's my husband doing right now? The mind is thinking. And the conscious mind, as I said, the moment it starts thinking, it's not paying attention. That's when you do the automatic behavior from the subconscious. Now, here's the resolution, because it's the basis of a new book I'm writing, okay? And this is, what would happen, as you just said, the conscious mind's connected to your spirit, and it has your wishes and desires. And you might say, but what happened if I would run my life with that conscious mind instead of 5%? What if I ran my life 95% or 100% with my conscious mind? What would my life look like then? And here's the answer. And almost everybody out there and listening, one day or sometime they fell in love with somebody. And I call it the honeymoon, when you first fall in love, and it's so romantic, and life is so beautiful. I ask people, I say, go back to a time in your life where you fell head over heels in love. And I say to the people, I say, when you go back there, were you, at that time when you were so in love, were you healthy? Almost everybody goes, yes, extremely healthy. And I go, okay, when you were just falling in love, did you have energy? And they all laugh, because I joke and say, you probably made love for days without stopping for sleep or food. And they all laugh. And I go, when you were in that honeymoon, when it was fresh and you were so in love, I said, was life so beautiful at that time, you couldn't wait for the next day to have more of this love? And they all go, yes, yes. I said, it was like heaven on earth, wasn't it? When you fell in love at that honeymoon, it may have lasted a few days, a week, a month, half a year, that honeymoon period, I said, during that honeymoon, you were healthy, you had energy, your life was so beautiful, it was like heaven on earth. Everybody goes, yes, yes, and yes. I go, well, here's what science has now told us. When you fall in love like that, your conscious mind doesn't wander and travel and do a lot of thinking. Your conscious mind stays right there. It wants everything that it sees. Why should it run away and think when you got everything you want in front of you? Why is this important? The one time in your life where you essentially were running 100% from the conscious mind, I say, what did you create? Heaven on earth. And that's why, because for that one period of time you were creating every decision and every action was based on your personal wishes, your personal desires, what you wanted from life. And I say, well, look what you did. When you were running with your conscious mind and not letting the subconscious programs kick in, when you did that, you created heaven on earth. And I say, then how come the honeymoon disappeared? Because the people remember the very beginning part where it was so juicy and so exciting and so loving. And then I say, yeah, but at some point it disappears and it becomes, I mean, you could still be in love, but it's not the same honeymoon. It's more like average life all of a sudden. I say, well, what happened? You had this honeymoon, heaven on earth, and then at some point it became regular life. And the answer is this. When you were in the honeymoon, that was because you were operating nearly 100% from your spiritual wishes and your desires, and you created exactly a life based on your wishes and desires. But at some point, life still gets busy. I don't care if you're in a honeymoon or not. You got to pay the rent. You got to fix the car. You have to do the chores, whatever it is. You got obligations. And I say, why is that important? Because when your mind starts to think about the things you have to do, like pay the rent, fix the car, whatever, then your mind's not paying attention. And guess what? What behavior is playing when your conscious mind is now thinking about things? I go, oh, that's the subconscious programs start playing, and they have the behaviors from your mother and your father and your family and all that. And guess what? The honeymoon only worked when you were operating from your personal wishes and desires from your conscious mind. When life gets busy and your conscious mind starts to wander because it's thinking, then you start playing the other programs that you got from your parents. And the significance is those programs were not part of the honeymoon, but once they become introduced, the honeymoon changes. It's no longer the honeymoon because there are behaviors in there that your partner didn't see them during the honeymoon. They only showed up after the honeymoon.
But Bruce, it seems like everything. I understand the power of conditioning, and I understand what happens in the first years of our existence and how we can be conditioned by our parents to believe in one way and behave in another in life circumstances. Yet, don't you believe that the power of the spirit that's beyond the ego, is that it's beyond even the conscious mind, can have an impact on our lives, so it can direct the way we walk on our paths? And let me just give you an example. Like I was brought up here in Ecuador, and with the conditioning for my family and the society and the school and whatever, but I never had any mystical communication with anybody that surrounded me. When I started my adolescence, maybe earlier than that, when I was between 8 or 9 or something around that, I started having out-of-body experiences. And then that was not conditioned by anybody. I just had those experiences. And after that, I started having some a priori information that was coming to me, and that made me understand certain things that I could not share with anybody, because the time that I was growing up, sharing these kind of mystical things was just something from lunatics. So
right.
that was not coming from conditioning. That was coming from someplace else. And it was so strong.
Mind, remember, I said the conscious mind is the one connected to the spirit. And you said about 7, 8, or 9. Remember I said the conscious mind, the brain wasn't even operating from that until after 7. So when you were 7, 8, 9, all of a sudden the conscious mind was beginning to work. It wasn't working earlier. So now that it began to work, you also realize, remember I said the conscious mind is both the spirit plus the learning that occurred. Well, when you get into that conscious mind, you could focus on the spirit end, which you just did, which you told me you did, right? Mm-hmm. That's real. That's absolutely real. That was the first time in your life you can actually be in contact with your, be aware of your spiritual source and all this other intuitive information. And then, as you also said, which was very critical, because in your case, separate than others, most other kids, if they start talking like that to the parents about their mystical experiences, the parents say, no, don't talk like that, or don't say these things. People will think you're crazy. And what happens to most people, even though they were connected to their spirit, the concept of the programming, the concept of shame, or the concept of, people will think you're crazy, people disconnect. Even though they, in their young part, they were connected and they saw it, the programming of the community was, don't go there. Don't say these things. And so most people, and you're an exception in this, Gloria, most people then shut up and don't tell their parents ever again, or anybody else, about these mystical spiritual experiences, because out of shame. Oh no, they'll think I'm crazy if I talk like that, so I'm not going to say that. And we get disconnected from that source that you were richly connected to.
Yes, and have you heard, I don't know if you've heard about psychosynthesis, and Roberto Assagioli, that's the kind of psychology I practice, and he talks about the repression of the sublime, which is in the superconscious. He has a really cute model of the consciousness, and he has the subconscious mind and the I in the center, and then the superconscious, which he mentions a lot about the repression of the sublime as being as unhealthy as all the things that we repress in the subconscious mind. And for instance, like repressing all the mystical experience, it could be as bad as repressing all the bad memories from our trauma in our childhood. And so I don't know if
100%, Gloria, and that's why we're saying, what if we woke up? What if we didn't teach children to be quiet about that mystical experience? What if we offered them the opportunity to speak about it and encourage them and say, this is very good, this is connection? We would make smarter, more intelligent young kids to grow up in this world. But as you're aware, we don't reward that kind of discussion. We actually give a penalty to people who do that. And that's why it's not in our everyday life, because it was there when we were very young, but the society and the culture have repressed that. so that we're afraid to talk about it, and then we disconnect. And even if it comes up in your mind a person who's been programmed not to talk about it, a thought might come up in their mind, but their conscious might say, no, shut off. Don't people will think you're crazy. So we disconnect from our own spiritual source. Mm-hmm. And that is the biggest problem on this planet.
Completely. Now you talk more about the importance of the brain and the mind, and like, for instance, people like Greg Braden that you know talk about the electromagnetic strength of the heart, which is higher than the brain, and that it would be more important to learn about the power of the heart more so than the power of the mind. What would you say about this?
I actually say they both work together, and that's very important. They work very much together, and here's the reason why. As Greg Braden brings up, the power of the heart as an electromagnetic machine, like, if you put a meter, like a voltmeter, read the electromagnetic, the heart is like, 1,000 times more powerful than the electromagnetic voltage coming from the brain. And what's important about the heart is, when I give a lecture, I try to describe it. I say, look, imagine a guitarist who plays like a solo acoustic guitar. And as he plays his guitar, I say, how many people can sit around him very close and hear him? I say, okay, 50 people, 30, 40, 50 people. If it gets bigger than that, they can't hear the music because they're too far away. I go, okay, so that the power of the acoustic is not very much. But if I take an amplifier and amplify his guitar, I could play it in a coliseum with 25,000 people in it. And the same signal is going now to 25,000 people instead of 50 people. And what Greg is trying to bring up, and it's also a group called Heart Math, is if you can get your brain and your heart in harmony, then the spiritual aspect of the brain and the intelligence of that becomes amplified. The heart is like the giant amplifier. And so when you bring your brain and your heart together in harmony, you can take your spirit and broadcast it very wide and have a very powerful influence. People who come from their heart have more powerful influence than people who just think with their head. And the reason is because the heart is indeed an amplifier, but the brain and its connection to spirit is the connection source of the signal, and you can amplify it with the heart. So both of them play a role together, and when you just come from your head, your ideas don't go very far into the world because the power of your brain's electromagnetic field is not very powerful. So it's like the acoustic guitar player. He can only play to just those that sit around at his feet. Mm-hmm. But when you connect your brain and have it in harmony with your heart, it's a powerful amplifier that'll send your thoughts and your spirit and your consciousness out into the world around you, and you become very much more powerful.
Now, Bruce, how can we achieve that? Because as you have noticed through your research, most of us on this planet are not connected our hearts to our mind, to our brain. How can we actually learn? What steps can we take? What is the key fact that we need to become aware of in order to be coherent, to connect our hearts and our brains?
Well, we have to start letting go of some of the very basic programs. As I said, we were programmed during the first from the last what they call trimester of fetal development, the last 3 months, we are being programmed in the womb, and then for the next 6 or 7 years we're being programmed outside of the womb. Then those programs of almost, as psychologists tell us, about 70% of those programs are negative and disempowering and limiting. The beliefs, children have no belief in their own power. They're being programmed, like parents will say, who do you think you are? And you're not lovable, and you don't deserve these things. And they're saying that not because they want to punish the child. They actually think that by saying these things, the child will change the behavior. What they don't realize is if the child is under 7, the child's conscious mind, which is the thinking mind, is not working. Under 7, they're just recording whatever they hear. So if you tell a child, you don't deserve that, and they're 6 or they're 5, That is a belief that goes straight into the subconscious, just as the parent said it. I do not deserve. And then I said, look, 95% of our life comes from the subconscious. And I go, if you were a child in the family where the father kept saying you don't deserve that, when you're doing 95% of your adult life, you're coming from the program of the subconscious. I do not deserve. And your mind will create a life based on that belief, and that's why we sabotage ourselves. So the issue about how come we're not so powerful, and the answer is very important, is because we have been programmed not to be powerful.
Mm-hmm.
There's a program that we learn from our culture and our community to take away the power, because here's the simple point. Gloria, I'm going to tell you a simple biology fact. We are all equally powerful in our conscious creative minds. We all are equally powerful. And I say, but if we're all equally powerful, then how come there are some very rich and powerful people over here, and there's so many poor people with no power over here? And if they're all equally powerful, how can this be? And here's the fact. The rich people didn't gain more power. It's the poor people who lost their power. They lost it through the programming. We have been programmed to be weak and not powerful because other people control us. And this is why there's the evolution that's happening right now, is we must get our power back, because we must go into the future owning that we are spiritual, we're powerful, we're creators, and as I said, even if you only had a limited period, you go back in your life, if you did have a honeymoon period in your life, I want people to know that was not an accident, that was not, wow, just, ooh, I was really lucky. It's like, no, you created the honeymoon. You created heaven on earth. But then, as I said, without knowing it, we lose, the conscious mind starts to go to work thinking about things, and then we lose everything, and the honeymoon goes away. And I'm trying to say this, which you are quite aware of. If I could take the beliefs of my conscious creative mind and put them into my subconscious mind as programs, then guess what? I could have a honeymoon every day of my life for the rest of my life on this planet. I could create health, harmony, love, beautiful everything, just like you did when you were in that honeymoon. But it doesn't have to be limited. The only reason it's limited is because we have other programs that cancel our power.
Now, regarding those programs, Bruce, like if we are really that powerful, and now we are starting to listen more often, in every circle or spiritual circles or just conscious awareness circles, that we are starting to listen that we are all very powerful. Yet we still have the conditioning of the beliefs that are so grounded in our subconscious mind. So how can we work to transform those beliefs? Because as you mentioned with so many examples, it's like we would love to do something in our lives or acquire something, whatever. But deep in our subconscious mind is grounded the belief that we cannot reach that. So
right, and go back to what, and it's funny because, as I said, go back and listen to what Jesus said. He said, all the miracles that I do, you can do them even better than I can do them, but you don't believe it. And you see, and that's the absolute truth. That's what he was trying to tell people 2,000 years ago, and we're still trying to tell people the same thing today.
Well, that same thing happened with Master Yoda when Luke couldn't pick up the sheep from the water, and it was because he didn't believe in it, and that's what Master Yoda told him. So, you heard it from Jesus, I heard it from Master Yoda, actually. But what I'm saying
is...
And
the whole idea is this, as you well know, that if we can reprogram the subconscious mind. This is very important, because a lot of people think, oh no, I've had this my whole life and it's always been this way and I can't change it. It's like, no, that's a belief. That's a negative belief, but it's a belief, because you can change any program or belief in the subconscious mind. You can recover your power. You can recover your health. Look, 90% of ill health, 90% of the patients that go see a doctor because of a problem, listen to this, 90% is because of stress. Not because the body is broken, the body is weak, the body is frail. That's not true. We are super powerful and strong, but we don't believe that.
So what's the process we need to undergo to let ourselves at the atomic level or whatever know that awareness, know that wisdom of knowing that we have the power? Because if we knew about it, I wonder if if you are so aware of it, can you do the kind of healing that Jesus did on somebody else, or is it that we have to still go through so many cleansing inside from our beliefs before we can reach that level of power in ourselves? So how do we go about that? How can we actually regain that power?
Yes. We have to recognize that there are two minds. This would go back to the conscious and the subconscious. That's number one. And we have to recognize this is the very important part. They don't learn in the same way. So the conscious mind is the creative mind, the spiritual, creativity. The conscious mind can read a self-help book and go, oh yes, it makes so much sense, and if I did this, I could have a great life. And I go, you read the book and your life is still the same. I say you go to the lecture and you hear, oh my goodness, yes, I am more powerful. I understand that. My conscious mind says, I learned that. And I say, but how come your life is still the same way it was? And here's the answer. Because while the conscious mind can learn from going to a lecture, reading a book, just having a big aha, the conscious mind can learn. That's not the way the subconscious mind learns. The subconscious mind learns in two primary ways. And the primary ways are, one, hypnosis, which is where the child's mind was operating until they were 6 or 7. So it was like unconscious, just like the hypnosis is like a child with like a video camera. The child is just recording. Whatever it sees goes straight into the subconscious mind. After you're 6 or 7, the subconscious mind learns, but in a different way, by habit. You have to repeat something. You have to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it, but it learns. So I say, like when you were a child and you had to learn the alphabet, how many times did you have to repeat A, B, C, all the way to Z? How many times did you repeat it until one day you could repeat it without stopping? You could go all the way. You didn't learn it once. You learned it by repeating it and repeating it. When you learn how to drive a car, you didn't learn it just the first day you were out. You had to practice and repeat it and repeat it. So there are two ways to really, change the subconscious mind, but they're not the ways the conscious mind can learn. I could go to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist could say, "Let's review your life," and then they say, "Yeah, my mom did this, and my dad did that, and my friend did that," and you cry and you go, "Oh, what a bad thing." And at the end of all this psychology, I say, "Do you know why your life is so messed up?" And you go, "Yes, I know. All these things happened." And I say, well, now you're consciously aware of how it happened. Is your life any different? And the answer is no. And the reason is this. You can educate the conscious mind, but that does not change the program in the subconscious mind. So, educating the conscious mind is separate. You want to educate the subconscious mind, then you have to educate it the way the subconscious mind learns. Hypnosis and habit, and a new thing called super learning, which are the new energy psychology. My website, brucelipton.com, has a list called resources, and in there they review, there's a whole list of all new ways of changing the subconscious mind. But you cannot change the subconscious mind by just becoming conscious or reading a book or learning a fact, because the conscious mind learns that way, but it doesn't translate into the subconscious programming. And that's the biggest problem we face on the world, because people say, oh, okay, I learned the truth, and now my life is still the same. I go, yeah, because you're only working 5% from your conscious mind, 95% from the subconscious. Your conscious mind you just educated, you still didn't change the subconscious, and it's operating 95% of the time. It's going to give you the same life no matter how much you train the conscious mind. We have to learn to go in and work with the subconscious mind. Yeah. And the very simple truth is, if you took your wishes and your desires that you have with your conscious mind and made programs in your subconscious with the same wishes and desires, you know what that means? Think about it. It means if your conscious mind gets busy and thinking, when you default to the subconscious, you're still going to play the same programs that your conscious mind had anyway. The subconscious mind gave you the conscious mind gave you the honeymoon. And the subconscious has the same programs then that means even if you're not paying attention, if the subconscious kicks in, it's still going to play the same honeymoon program. You could have a honeymoon the rest of your life, but you have to correct the programs in the subconscious. We were programmed by other people. It's a true story. The programming is disempowering because when we lose our power, other people become more powerful. And that was the point of why I was saying there are powerful people and there are people with no power, and yet I said they're all equally powerful. And the question is, so how do the other people get more powerful? And I said, they didn't get more powerful. They just took away your power. And if you got your power back, then you'd be as powerful as anybody else on this planet, but we were not programmed that way. That has been an intentional part of culture for a couple of thousand years, is to the powerful people stay in power, and the less powerful people are always less
manipulated.
Powerful, and for 1,000 years now.
So would you correlate maybe in this way, like the conscious mind is like the external world and the subconscious mind is like the inner world of every human being?
Well, I wouldn't separate that way, because the subconscious mind has all the details about how life is supposed to work automatically. You know that the sun comes up in the east and sets in the west. How do you know that? Because every day it does the same thing. So a habit, you see it come up from the same place and it goes down the same place. You understand about the world. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. How'd you learn that? It's about the outer world. Oh, by watching it every day. You've got a habit. How many days in a row does it take to learn? It always comes up over there and sets over there. So you can learn about the external world or the internal world, but the subconscious is just anything that's repeated over and over again, that becomes the subconscious belief system. And that is why, unfortunately, and a lot of people might be upset with me by saying it, but unfortunately, the leadership of this world, which included the church and now science, and the leaders, not the scientists, but the people who manipulate the science, they knew this stuff. As I said, the Jesuits, over 500 years, they would say, give me a child and I will show you the man. They knew this as a fact for 500 years. It's not just new data, but why did they know it and why did they keep it that way? Because they became powerful, and the average person feels they are a victim. The average person says, I can't get in touch with God, or my spirit is not connected with God. It's sort of like, that's absolutely untrue. You are always a piece of God. You've always been a piece of God. You are your own individual little piece, and you can never be disconnected from that. You can never get out of favor with God on that. And yet, people have given us these programs of guilt and fear and weakened us, so we don't even trust ourselves. We trust nothing. And when we don't trust ourselves or we don't trust anything else, other people take the power and control us. And this is why this is a very important time on our planet right now. We're changing everything. The world as we know it is falling apart. And I just want people to understand this. Very important. It looks scary outside. Yes, jobs are getting lost, businesses are falling, economy is going bad, the government's bad, all these kind of things going on. I'm going, this is a very good thing.
Yes, indeed.
To me, it's a good thing. I'm going, because we are, as science has already revealed to us, we are going extinct. We are destroying the environment, and we come from that environment. You destroy the environment, we can't live here anymore, and the world we're destroying it. And the significance about that is, it's the beliefs that we have been operating by for the last couple thousand years that are causing our own ending. And why is that important? If we don't change those beliefs, then extinction is for real, and it's in front of our face, and it's very fast. I mean, the science has already revealed in 30 years, Gloria, there won't be fish in our ocean. Because we are destroying we're catching all the fish and destroying the breeding and the environment that they grow in, and it's like that's science fiction. Planet Earth, no fish in the ocean in 30 years. Why is this important? If we don't change what we're doing soon, the whole thing is going to shift like that very quickly. And so why is it important? And this is why I said, why am I excited that I see the thing falling apart? And the answer is, It's the beliefs that we have been programmed with via the church, via academia, through healthcare, through government, through economy. These beliefs that we've been living by are the beliefs that are causing the destruction of our own planet. And I see that the only way out is that these beliefs have to be changed. So guess what? When you see everything falling apart, to me, it's like, I'm so excited because this is an opportunity to create new beliefs, new ways of living, new ways of being in harmony, recognizing that all humans are part of one super organism called humanity. As I said, a human body is made out of 50 trillion cells. The cells are the living entity. The human is, by definition, a community. And then I say, the new evolution, each human being is like a cell in the body of something bigger called humanity.
That's true.
And right now, the cells are fighting each other and killing each other. And when that happens in the body, we call it autoimmune disease, self-destruction.
Yeah.
And we have to stop the fighting.
Yes,
we have
definitely.
to stop the killing. We have to recognize that every human is a piece of God. It is not for us to kill people and to do these things. It's for us to come together and create a new world based on love, community, and harmony. And this is not being encouraged by the institutions that we have right now.
Yes.
But then again, it's those institutions that are beginning to crash. And that's why
They're
I'm
going
so
to.
hopeful.
Yeah.
Because it says when they crash, we can build a new
Something
belief
new.
system.
No, it would be interesting, like, for us as humans to look back and realize that after all, we have never been Homo sapiens, but rather Homo erectus, Homo colossus erectus, or something like that. That's a term I read once from a book of ecology book that meant that we destroy things in big time, in big.
Yeah.
Big, in how do you say, huge. Colossus is something so huge. We are destroyers. So it's amazing that we would have called us Homo sapiens. We have nothing to do with wisdom. Not the way we've lived in what we see in this world, what we have created as humanity. We have the power to change, but you see, Atlantis and all these ancient civilizations that were destroyed, maybe for the same reason. There is something that we are repeating as a humanity, whether they got extinct or whatever, and we are on this process of going to extinction, but we are not. You see, most people have some idea in the background of their heads because the news are all over the world that something's not working right, but we are not willing to do anything unless we get hit, like what happened in Japan. Unless we get in a horrible situation, we are not. We are sort of lazy people. We are comfortable people that are not willing to do the changes we need to do unless something really happens to us.
Gloria, that is the absolute dead truth. That is the so important truth, because I even said it's crisis that causes evolution, meaning until the moment of the absolute crisis, nobody's going to make an effort to make a change. As you said, when the tsunami hit, now you got to make a change. When a person gets cancer, and they realize that their life is on the line, that crisis frequently wakes them up and they take back control of their life and they heal the cancer from the changing of the way they've been living and the way they've been believing. Because the cancer is just a reflection of the life. It's not the genetics that we thought it was. And why is this important? Because you're absolutely right. We are facing the biggest crisis of all. We are, as Atlantis was here, and as you said, they didn't do it right and they got lost. And guess what? We're coming to the same place just like they did, where the decisions have to be made that say, you cannot live the old way because the old way is causing the problem. We must change radically. Will they change? Now that, this is the question. I'm very hopeful because...
to change or not to change, that is the question.
Yes, that's the most question, but it will not happen if we don't change.
Exactly.
If it doesn't change, the writing is on the wall. The future is already determined, and we're going extinct. Now the point is, do we wake up? And if we do, the moment we do, we can change the world.
Hopefully we will do that soon enough, or before everything goes extinct, even ourselves.
I'm very hopeful for that.
Yeah. Well, Bruce, I want to thank you so much for the time you've given us. I actually still have a lot more questions that are coming to mind as we talk, but I'm going to give myself an opportunity that I'm asking you right now for maybe in a couple of months, or maybe I don't know when, I can call you again and we can do another chat about new subjects.
I would love to do it, Gloria, and we have a lot to talk about, and things are coming. So if we can, when we set up a date with my office, we should do it again, because we're getting closer and closer to that time that you're talking about. We must make a decision now to change who we are.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Bruce. We've enjoyed it so much, and I'll send you the links to the upload for the interview so you can spread it around as you wish.
I so appreciate it, and I want to thank everybody who's listening, because each one of us is a participant in this evolution. It's not going to happen unless we do something. And so I'm glad they're listening, because that means they're open to some new ideas.
That's correct. Thank you so much, and until the next opportunity, Bruce.
Thank you so much, Gloria. Good day.
Good day. Bye-bye.
Things like matter. And they said the atom in Newtonian physics, at first they said the atom was the smallest thing in the universe. But when the physicists started to be able to look inside the atom, at first they found things that looked like little particles, like protons and electrons and neutrons. And so they just said, oh, the atom is made out of smaller physical particles. But then quantum physics, and this is what changes everything, quantum physics says, so what's an electron made out of? Or what is that proton particle made out of? And when they looked inside, there was nothing physical. It was energy. It was like a miniature tornado. And you say, well, but that's not physical. I go, listen, let's say you're driving your car down the road and a big tornado is coming right down the road at you. And I'm going to ask you a question, Gloria. What do you think would happen if you say, look, I'm just going to drive my car right through the tornado. I'm not going to stop. I'll just drive right through the tornado. And I'm going to ask you, do you think you could drive through a tornado with a car?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either, because a tornado is so powerful it can lift up the trucks and buildings and all that kind of stuff like that. And you say, yeah, but it's physical. You can't drive a car through it. If you drove your car into a tornado, it would be like driving your car into a stone wall. The car won't go through the tornado. And I say, yeah, but what's a tornado made out of? You say, well, I can see it. It's physical. I go, no. What you see is the dirt and the dust and anything that got picked up by the wind. But I said, the tornado itself is just the wind. There's nothing physical. And yet, it's an energy that has got so much force in it that if you try to push through a tornado, you can't. In your mind, it would appear to be very physical, and yet it's made out of energy. There's nothing physical about it. And then I say, well, here's an interesting fact. The atoms have miniature tornadoes. That's what they're made out of. And the tornadoes inside the atoms are even more powerful than the tornadoes that we see on the television or going across the land. And why is that relevant? Because I said, well, the atom, like a tornado, it's not physical, it's a force. And I say, yeah, but it's so powerful that you can't push your hand through the atom in the same way you can't drive the car through the tornado. The atom and the tornado are both not physical, but they have the character, or they look or feel like they're physical, but they're only made out of energy.
Mm-hmm. Now, what I think when you were saying this is like the ancients. Since we have 1 hour, I just want to get started with what I would think is a very simple question, and then we can get on with other things. I would like to ask you, what is the most important findings so far that have been done in epigenetics?
Well, we have to understand what the word epigenetics means. So let's back up and go, before epigenetics, what did we understand in regard to science? And the answer was something called genetics. And if I say what I was teaching medical students, we would say genetic control, which means control by genes. This is the belief that most medical students and doctors have been trained with, and the public have receive this kind of education through their basic schooling about how genes control our characters and our traits and our behavior. And when you believe that story, that genes control your life, then you have to stop for a second, and you have to say, wait, as far as I know, I didn't pick the genes I came with, and if I don't like my traits, I can't change the genes. And then what that leaves people to believe is that we are victims of our heredity. So, like, if there's cancer running in the family, or Alzheimer's, or diabetes, everyone says, oh my goodness, this is genetic and it's running in my family, and I'll be a victim of this, and I can't do anything about it because I can't control the genes. So we believe in victim, and that's really bad, because that means you give up power over your life. You say, no, the genes have power over my life. And then we find ourselves that we believe we're weak and we're frail or we're vulnerable. And I go, okay, that's the old science. I say, what's the new science? It's called epigenetics. And I say, well, what is epigenetics? I say, well, epi, the little EPI in the front, it means above. So if I say epigenetic control, it really means control above the genes. And now we know that the way we see life, the way we respond to the environment, our perceptions of the world, these are what control our genes. And I say, well, why is that important? Because if genes control your life, you're a victim. But if your perceptions or your beliefs control your life, then you realize you can be master, because you can change your perception, you can change your environment, you can change your belief. So the new science and the old science are profoundly different. The old science, victim; the new science, we are masters of our genetics and our fate. We don't have to be, and we use the life to learn about who we are. And this is very critical, because we're leaving behind the victim story, that we are not victims, that we are spiritual entities that have a very powerful control over our lives. But the issue is, we don't believe it. And it's very interesting, Gloria, because I wasn't raised in the conventional Christian religion, and yet when I go back today with my knowledge, and I hear the words that Jesus talked about, and he said, look, you can renew your life with your belief. He said that that you could do all the miracles that he did, but you don't believe it. And it turns out the new science says he was exactly right, that this is absolutely true. But if we believe we are victims, we become a victim. If we believe we are masters, we can become a master. And yet, all of us have been programmed to be victims and weak and feel we have no power. And this is a time in the world where that belief is going to disappear, and the new understanding of how truly powerful and spiritual we are is going to return to the civilization, and it's going to change the world like a revolution. The whole thing is going to change.
Yes, definitely. And I'm looking forward to it, as many people are, I imagine. And, one thing that I've been always wondering is that, we are made of cells and, systems and tissues, but the cells are made out of atoms, and the atoms are made of subatoms, and so forth. And they are 99% empty, 99.999%. At least that's what scientists are saying, according to quantum physics.
100% empty.
Okay, so this is the question. If it's 100% empty, if the cells are 100% empty, and atoms and whatever is made of, the building blocks that are made of, how does matter come into existence? If we are pure energy and we are empty, how can we become solid beings? What's the process that goes from point A, which is energy, to point B or point Z, which is matter?
Okay, very good question, because after coming from a world of teaching about chemistry and molecules and matter and DNA and genes, when I started to get into quantum physics, what we found out was the answer was this: what is quantum physics versus the conventional physics? It's also called Newtonian physics. Newtonian physics is the physics that looks at the world and says it's made out of physics. Believing that cancer is going to take us or some disease is going to take us because it's in our family, we now recognize that if we change our attitudes, our emotions, and our beliefs, that we can control our genes and can control our life. And that's the biggest difference between a victim and a master.
Now, Bruce, I have a question coming to my mind after listening to you, and what came to me was like, if we have the power over the genes, what happened when I was born and I didn't choose then the face I was going to have or how I was going to become physically, and so many ways I look like my dad or my mom, but that's genetics, and we don't have total power over that.
It's very interesting, Gloria, because I have to tell the very simple truth. When I was teaching in a medical school in my growing up in my developmental period and college and graduate school, I was not a spiritual person. I didn't actually believe in spirituality. I believed in the science of genes and chemistry. So that's why I ended up being a scientist. And then when I learned how the cells work, the study of the cells revealed to me that we're actually spiritual entities that play through a body. A body is almost like a television set with antennas, and the antennas pick up like an identity, like a broadcast. So the relevance that it really blew my mind was to own the fact that our identity is like a television broadcast, but our body is like a television set. Now, they're all different kinds of television sets, but they can play the same station. So the television set is not the personal identity, not the spirit. So the question is, then, who are we? Well, we're spirits playing through a physical body. And when I realized this, it so blew my mind, because I thought in the chemistry world, we're born and we have these genes and we have this chemistry and then we have a life, and then when you die, the chemistry goes back into the earth, and that's that. Now I realize the bodies come and go, but the spirit is always present. And so in fact, before I said we didn't pick the genes, I actually think we did. I think that we picked a life to come into, like a video game, and we jump into this life.
The Hindus, they knew about the tornadoes in our bodies through the chakras. And what I feel is like the manifestation on different levels, like we are multi-dimensional beings. And that's one thing I want to ask you, if you believe that humans are multi-dimensional beings, because there are levels of manifestation, and the physical world is the densest of manifestations possible. And that's where we are living our experiences, but we also are beings that come from energy and spiritual beings. So there is some component into our existence as humans. I don't know about the animals, but I know as human that we have these possibilities of being from living in one body but being from different dimensions. Is that possible?
Absolutely. It's basically it's sort of like, as I said, number one, if you see the television set in your room, you say, that's the physical television set. And I say, yeah. Then you turn it on, you see the show. And I say, is the show coming from the television, or is it coming from the air that is invisible and then being picked up by the television set? And the answer is, no, the show is not inside the television. It's coming through the air. And I say, well, show it to me. You say, I can't see it. It's a television broadcast. It's a wave. You can't see it. It's energy. And I go, this is exactly the same as you look at the physical body and you say, that's like the television set, it's physical. And I go, but your identity is not from the inside the body, it's actually being received like a television set. This is true. On the surface of your cells, of all of your cells, your body is made out of like 50 trillion cells. When you look in the mirror, Gloria, and you look at yourself and you say, there's one human being, Gloria, looking back. And I go, well, you call yourself a human being, but in truth, you are a community of 50 trillion cells. So you are made out, the cells are the living things. And I said, well, how do you play through the body? And I go, on the surface of the cells, of your 50 trillion cells, there are little molecules called proteins, but they look like little television antennas. And no two people have the same set of antennas and on their cells. And I say, yeah, but these are very important, because if I try to take my cells and put it into your body, Gloria, your immune system will say, these don't belong to me, they're not self. And your immune system will get rid of those cells, saying not self. And I go, yeah, but when the body says not self, how does